Welcome everyone to the third event in our BAD Online International Festival. My name is Catherine Dupelou-Menager and I'm the Artistic Director of BAD Sydney. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, to waters and to culture, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Today, I'm speaking from Camaragal country. Now, we're staying in the US for this third international festival session with a very special guest. Today, we're talking to Harlan Coben, who has written extraordinary bestsellers of numerous thrillers translated to many, many languages. Not only have they sold extraordinarily well, but many of them have become hugely popular international best-selling television series. So we're particularly lucky. Harlan is a phenomenally successful writer with a legion of fans who've been sending us messages telling us how excited they are. Thank you so much for making the time to talk to us today about your new book, The Match, and welcome to your first event with BAD Sydney.
Thanks, Catherine. Nice to meet everybody.
Michael Duffy is interviewing Harlan tonight. We have Michael to thank for actually being here. Michael was one of the co-founders of BAD Sydney about 5 years ago. And this is only one of his many achievements. He's been a journalist, a publisher, a broadcaster, and he's also a novelist. He's the author of the Bella Grieve series of crime novels and the website orphanrock.com, all set in the Blue Mountains outside Sydney. And Harlan, when you come to Australia, which I hope you'll do, it's the most beautiful area to do bushwalks and to just experience. Fantastic. Welcome, Michael. Before we start, I'll quickly thank our sponsors, the City of Sydney and Create New South Wales, without whom we wouldn't be here. So a heartfelt thank you. We have a relationship with Booktopia and we appreciate their support. Go to Booktopia to buy Harlan's books. And if you go to our website, you can click direct under his picture and buy the book straight away. Welcome to all members of the BAD community, and in particular viewers from public libraries throughout New South Wales. It's great to have you here, and welcome in particular to viewers from the Brisbane area. It's the first time you've joined us and we're loving having you with us. It's good to go interstate. So very quickly, this is how we'll run the event. Harlan and Michael will talk for about 50 minutes, and then Michael will ask the questions that you've already sent in. I'll disappear off your screens shortly and just come back at the end to say thank you. So Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. Harlan, welcome to Australia. We have got many readers. We don't get many mentions in books by American authors at all, so we get rather excited when we do. And I can't help noting that your first published novel, Play Dead, actually had a sort of establishing scene that was in Australia or just off the coast, wasn't it? Where did that idea come from?
Yeah, wow, that's an old one. I visited Australia first time I think it was 1985, maybe 86, and I started it in Cairns. At the time, to show you how long it was, there was literally like one hotel there that Americans or Western world was sort of staying in. It was called the Pacific International, right on the water. And I really had a great time. It was just, there wasn't that many Americans who were visiting Australia in the early 80s. And it really made an impression. I did Cairns, Brisbane, and Sydney at that time. And again, 85, maybe 86. And so Cairns especially sort of stuck with me a little bit. It was the first time I'd also done resort scuba diving, where I literally landed from a plane and somebody gave me gear and I went down and my ears were popping for about 3 weeks afterwards. So that was what it made a real strong impression on me. And when I was thinking of where I could send these people on their honeymoon to open up Play Dead, which I wrote when I was, I think 26, 27, something like that. That's where I chose.
Well, we're glad you did. Since then, you've had a stream of ideas. I just want to talk to you a bit about writing in general. And, Bruce Springsteen once said, you can't light a fire without a spark. And you've had this continual stream of ideas. I mean, one of the great things about your books for me is that each one's got probably a couple of ideas in it. And part of the magic is in seeing how they eventually intertwine and come together. What sort of mind do you think you need to actually come up with ideas like that? Has there ever been a time when you haven't had this constant stream of ideas?
Well, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of them the harder part in many ways for me is to figure out which ones will work and become a novel. Um, Part of it is that my brain sort of does, right. It's like anything else, nature versus nurture. And a lot of my brain is always asking, what if, suppose, trying to come up with story. I can be fairly specific with the match. So I was taking a hike through the woods of New Jersey. And the woods of New Jersey are not exactly, the area, the bush area, or where I was hiking up in Cairns. It's kind of, I get bored, frankly, hiking in woods. I mean, there's a tree, and then there's another tree, then there's another tree. I get it, there's trees. I prefer city walking. I like to see faces. I like to see coffee shops. I like to browse, store windows and bookshops. So I'm walking with my family through the hot woods, and I'm whining the way I'm whining to you fine people here. And as I'm walking in a parallel path, I see a boy about 5 or 6 years old walking by himself. And I think to myself, again, what if this boy right now just came out of the woods? And he said he knew no life but living in the woods. He doesn't remember ever having parents. He fended for himself by breaking into cabins to eat or finding fruit or whatever it is on the land. But he has no idea how he ended up in the woods. And now 30 years pass, and he still has no idea how he ended up in the woods. And as the match opens up, he has gotten a DNA match on one of those DNA websites, and he's standing across the street from his biological father, about to start getting the answers. By the way, occasionally you'll be hearing dogs barking. For those who follow me on social media know I have 2 Havanese dogs who are upset they're not in here spending time with us, so you may occasionally hear them. So that's a little bit of how my mind sort of works, at least in the beginning, to start a novel.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's like to have an imagination. You said that part of the challenge is to work out which ideas are going to work for you in the book. Do you find you get a bit better at doing that as things go on?
Not really. What I also do, so this is the initial idea, right? I just kind of gave you the initial idea, but there's 4 or 5 things in each book that I'm writing down that I kind of want to write about, and I don't know how many will end up going in the book. So in this case, I wanted to write about reality TV, especially the romance reality TV shows that I watched a little bit with my daughters, and absolutely, they weren't for me. Let's just put it that way. And that whole manipulative world. I wanted to write about Instagram influencers. I wanted to write about online bullying. I wanted to write about these new DNA websites that are turning the world upside down in many ways, where people are finding out their father wasn't their father and all of that, like 23andMe. And what ended up happening is all of them ended up playing a role in this book, which kind of surprised me. So I'm starting with this opening. How can I find, this guy's going to find out his past. How can I make it link in to all of these other stories and all these other things that I want to do? Well, someone's going to be missing that he finds from a DNA site. Suppose that person had won one of those shows like Bachelor, right? Had won and had disappeared. Now he's got to find that person. I can enter those worlds. And so I keep asking myself all these sort of questions until it just sort of starts rising up, and I have enough at least to begin the novel.
That's a fascinating insight. We'll talk about the match a bit later too, in more detail. Just keeping with the subject of writing in general for a minute, what are some of the other qualities you think you need to be a successful writer?
I always say there's 3 things that make a writer. 2 are obvious and 1 is not so obvious. The first is there's 3 things. So there's inspiration. Well, this is obvious. You have to be inspired. You have to really want to write. You have to want to tell a story. You have to have something you want to tell. So let's just move that aside. Inspiration, obviously. The second is perspiration. That is doing the actual work of writing. And for those who are interested in writing, I only count writing as writing. Outlining is not writing. Hanging with your friends is not writing. Going to Starbucks is not writing. Doing research is not writing. Creating characters is not writing. Only writing is writing. Only those moments that you put your butt in a chair and you turn either a piece of paper or a blank screen, you put words on those. Those are the only things I count as writing. Okay, so we have inspiration and we have perspiration, but the third, maybe most important, is desperation. And that is, I'm not fit to do anything else, like hold a real job, or I'm disorganized, I'm forgetful, I have no other marketable skills, And so that, I was once on a panel with a bunch of writers, and they asked us, and you maybe have gotten this question before, Michael, when you've been on panels, if you weren't a writer, what would you be? And one of my friends said a US Senator. I'm like, oh, please. I'd be a duvet cover. I got nothing. This is all I got. And that fear that I would actually have to have a real job and wake up at 6 in the morning and go to a drugstore and sell flare pens, that terrifies me, and I know I wouldn't be good at it. And that's one of the things that brings me back to that screen. That and the joy, really, of writing, the joy of being able to communicate one-on-one with people when a book comes out. So these are some of the things, the qualities that you have to do. So I always say to somebody, if you can be anything other than a writer, be that. Because if you're meant to be a writer, you're not going to listen to that advice.
It's very true. And the books you do write are often or usually about threats to happiness, normal life disrupted. People obviously love them. They love thrillers. They love mysteries. Any ideas why are we drawn to such dark stories?
I think most novels really fit that category. I mean, if I ask you to name your top 5 novels that are 100 years old, I guarantee all of them have crime in them, right? All of them have crime. Dostoevsky, Oscar Wilde, Hugo, Dumas, Shakespeare, whatever. They have a crime, and it's only sort of today that we sort of poo-poo any novel that has plot. So I think that the appeal, for the most part, has been the appeal forever. That crime fiction is telling stories. I don't go, it's the social novel of today. Maybe is, maybe isn't. There's people who are a lot smarter at figuring those kind of things out than I am. But what I love about the crime genre, if you will, and I don't really call it a genre, I consider it a form, like a haiku. And within that form, you can do anything. So in my books, I do love, redemption, disappearances, hope, family, all those things you want to do. But I have to also tell a story. I can't get lost in the genius of my own words and insight. I can't navel lint pick, if you will. I have to tell a story. And I think that's why these novels are so relevant and so important today. We still are making sure that we are telling a story and entertaining you. My job, first and foremost, is for you to take this book to bed at 11 o'clock at night and say, oh, I'm going to read for 20 minutes. And the next thing you know, it's 4 in the morning and you're sort of deliriously happy and you can't put the book down. I think that's part of our job. And I think that's probably why crime fiction, to me, I think, is probably still so relevant and still so well.
Yeah. You started with a couple of standalone books, then you wrote, I think it was 7 Myron Bolitar books, a series about a sports agent, a really interesting and unusual choice for a hero of a crime novel. They're normally detectives or lawyers or whatever. Where did that come from, and what were you trying to do with that choice?
Well, it was actually, my career wasn't really in the dumps. I was young. I was still in my 20s. And my agent at the time had many years ago written a paperback series of 1 or 2 books that had a sports agent. And he said, I know I can sell it. Sports are popular, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really, and at the time also is why you should never jump on a trend. They said female detective, make it a female sports agent. And I went back home and all of a sudden it was weird. Myron Bolitar just sort of appeared to me. And so I wrote those. But I really didn't, it was set in the world of sports, but they weren't sports books. Sports itself don't interest me. What interests me though is why we care so much, the money, the power, all the emotion raised to the 10th power. I'm right now watching my hockey New York Rangers play. And I was at game 7 the other night. The game 7 is 7 games if you're lucky. Each team had won 3. It's the very last game to decide who moves on. It goes to overtime, which means whoever scores next in hockey wins. And you're there live at the game and I'm going crazy. And then part of me is also saying, why do I care about this? They're not going to my work cheering me on. They're not going, go on, Harlan, one more page. They don't care. Why do I care? Anyway, so I thought it would be an interesting world to sort of explore. But I quickly left actually the sports part of it and really just dove into the world and the characters of Myron and Win and Esperanza and Big Cindy. And what I try to do with that series, and what I still try to do when I write it, is I always loved those kind of wisecracking detectives. I mean, I loved Spencer and and Raymond Chandler and Dashiell, all those guys that and women, and Sue Grafton and Sarah Paretsky came after. I love that detective, but I always found that, or didn't always find, but I often find that the plotting is not as good as a thriller plot. So I wondered if I took what I knew about plotting thrillers and I could apply it to this kind of cool, fun character where I could have both worlds, would that work? And that's how I started to write Myron Volator.
Yeah, I love the humor in the books and some of the
Thank you.
wordplay too. But it was, when I first started to read you, it was a bit unusual to come across so much humor in a thriller book. It took me a while to get my head around it, but you won me around. Do you have to think much about that consciously, or does the correct combination just kind of come?
I think life is funny, and I think humor works great in these books because it makes the dialogue zing and be very entertaining. I think it's more interesting to read that way, and I think it's a great defense mechanism. I think when you're in a fearful situation, I start cracking wise more often, and so I thought it'd be interesting, especially in the case of Myron, to have that. Most of my books, as opposed to some of the TV series, have a lot of humor in them. I think that that's just a great way of making what might be information dumps and things like that. It gives it life. It gives it spring. It makes you want to keep reading and with a little bit of a smile on your face, even through the dark times. But I don't necessarily work on it intentionally. It's just my voice and what it is. It's not like I say, you need a little humor here. You need to get serious here. It's just telling the story.
Yeah, Tell No One was your breakout book. It was a big, huge bestseller in 2001. I really loved the Myron Volator books, and I think you'd written 7 of those before then. But obviously this was a standalone. I think it was the first you'd done in some time. Mm-hmm. How did you feel about the fact that when that huge success came, it wasn't for Myron? How did Myron feel about it?
I was frankly just happy I had the huge success. I was not looking to gift horse in the mouth. Well, it's interesting, and I know there's some people out there that if they don't know who Myron Volator is, or they don't know who I am, and they hear a sports agent series, they kind of go, it's hard to sell that. It was easy to sell maybe in a very narrow way, but everybody kind of thought it was going to be Biff's going to score the winning goal kind of books. And so no matter how often we would tell, especially the female audience, which is I think the majority in crime fiction, no, you're going to really like this book once you get it. It's hard to get people to try it. So I frankly wasn't that surprised. Tell No One also had a great hook. For those who don't know the book, a man and a woman happily married. The wife is murdered. 8 years pass. He can't get over her death. He can't move on with his life. He gets an email. He clicks a hyperlink. He sees a webcam, and his dead wife walks by. She's still alive. That's the opening. Mm-hmm. So that's a great hook. And what it was nice was that then people did go back and discover Myron, because you read it, as we do you and I have done this how many times, Michael, in our life? We discover a new author, right? And then we say, oh my God, I got to read what else he's done. And all I had done really was Myron. So the Myron books then probably sold more the year after Tell No One came out than they had sold in the previous 7 years.
For sure. Harlan, let's talk about TV for just a minute. You've got this great deal with Netflix, I think, to make a series based on 14 of your books. And I know they've made a lot. How are they going with that?
It's been great. We've made, there's 7 currently on Netflix in Australia. If you put Harlan Coben in your Netflix, where you go netflix.com/Harlan Coben, but just search the name, all 7 should pop up. 3 are in English, 2 are in Polish, 1 is in French, and 1 is in Spanish. And it's been a joy. It's been a great experience. I think the shortest is 5 episodes, the longest is 8 episodes, most of them are 8. And it's been at this stage of the career, you're always looking for something new, fun, new things to do, interesting ways of telling stories. And so I've really had a great time. I've also been able to collaborate. The British have a very distinctive feel. The ones that are in English have a very distinctive feel. The 2 in Polish have a very different feel. Some like one, some like the others. Hopefully you like both. I think the Spanish is probably my favorite, the innocent of the foreign language ones, and probably the one I had the least involvement in, because there's a wonderful director named Oriol Paulo and a great actor named Mario Casas who sort of ran the show on that one. And I have about 2 or 3 or 4 more that I'm working on in development with Netflix. that'll hopefully be on a screen near you in the upcoming couple of years.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's I understand you're pretty close to the production. You don't write the scripts, but you've got an involvement there, which is
Yeah.
interesting because Hollywood, of course, has a bad reputation for chewing up writers and sort of spitting them out. But the relationship with TV these days seems a lot more positive. What do you think is
Well, it is. I think it is. And I think I'm also saved by the fact that it's not all American stuff. So I think I'm able to work overseas. I'm not, when I went out to Hollywood many years ago to try and be sort of my luck in making some of the books in, it was a really harsh place. And as you point out, it chewed up F. Scott Fitzgerald and Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, and it would chew me up like I was a little bug also. Um, but now I can, I'm old enough and experienced enough that I can kind of say, not take it that seriously. I don't mind walking away. I don't mind if it doesn't work out or something like that. And I've been very lucky that Netflix has been a really wonderful partner for me. They've let me do, I'm not saying the shows are exactly how I would have done them, because it's a collaborative process, but they've been collaborative and they've been helpful, and they have not been all the things that I had experienced myself as well in Hollywood during the years. And so, and Netflix also has such a wonderful global reach. So, the most recent one is Hold Tight and Stay Close. Probably a lot of people in Australia saw Stay Close. I know it did well here in January. So one day, I think it was December 31st, it came out, Netflix presses a button and all 8 episodes go out to everyone in the world in 190 countries with over 200 million plus subscribers. And think of how many people cheat on that subscription, how many people are watching and engaging in it and binging it right away. It's a little bit heady.
it's fantastic. Yeah. I think maybe your books are particularly, suitable for that because they do have this extraordinary number of twists and turns in them. And they just seem to translate very well. Often when I'm reading one of your books, it's almost visceral. It's physical because there's just so much going on. It's a bit like watching a sports match sometimes where you're just not sure who's winning or who's got the ball over there. And is that some of it's sort of feeling that you're after when you write them, that almost physical engagement?
Well, I certainly want a visceral reaction. And I think both my strength and possibly, if you want something I get a criticism, is there's rarely a twist I don't like. I like to twist. If you're not a person who likes twists and stories, I'm probably not your guy. If you like a straight ahead narrative where you can kind of know what's going to happen next, I'm not your guy. And the other thing is when I do make an adaptation, I am willing and in fact enjoy changing as much as possible. I think the worst adaptations stay slavishly devoted to the text. So some, really hardcore readers get upset. Oh my God, this was set in New Jersey and now it's being set in Paris, and the stranger in the book was a man and now it's a woman. Most of those decisions are mine, and most of them are because a TV series is a TV series and a book is a book, and they are very different. One is a visual medium. One is one I'm trying to get into your head and make visceral. So they're really quite different. And I think that's one of the important things if you're going to try to adapt is I never say to myself, oh, how can it be like the book? I'm just like, how can I make this even better than the book? Some of the books are older. I can make changes. As I said, The Stranger, for example, was sort of a nerdy white computer geek guy, and when we were casting and we brought in someone, just like, that's just not working. When he drops the bomb in the first episode on Richard Armitage's character about his wife faking a pregnancy, it's not working. I need let's try a cool woman, and then we brought in Hannah John Kamen, who when she gave, I'm like, oh, that's it, she's the stranger. And so you have to be willing to kill all your darlings when you write a book, and you have to do the same thing when you're adapting a book.
Kill some more. I very much enjoyed the latest book, The Match. As you said earlier, it picks up on Wilde, the main character from The Boy from the Woods. I found the bits about the DNA sites you mentioned earlier fascinating, and I really loved the digs at the reality TV shows. I thought that was fabulous. The concept of love as a battlefield. You're not a fan of that particular genre, are you? It seems.
I'm not. It's look. Watch whatever you want to watch. There's people who don't like my shows. I get it. It's not for everybody. But my daughters were watching it, and I will do anything to bond with my daughters, even watch those shows. But what actually was striking me at the time is really they're often quite cruel and very manipulative. The idea, if you're watching it, that you think you're watching something that's not scripted, or I'm not saying that people don't get emotional, they do, and they're not intentionally setting up situations where somebody's going to get hurt, is wrong, is ridiculous. They are. And so I thought that would be an interesting world to explore and also to set a novel in. And again, people just in general take a lot of things right now online or whatever else much too seriously. So people are being, canceled because they think this one cheated on that one. It's all bullshit. I mean, it's all made up. So I thought that would be an interesting world in which to set. I'm always looking for new worlds to set a story in. And suppose one of these guys who was really hugely popular and then got canceled and now has vanished. So now my character, Wilde, has to go into this world to get answers. I thought would be vastly entertaining. Not to mention enlightening for those who are wondering about those shows.
It's very enlightening. It's in Australia, apparently, some of these shows, they actually have psychologists whose job it is to follow up the contestants afterwards and help them deal with the trauma, the horrible trauma of having been on the show.
And they're not trying to pick people who are going to be rational. That's not going to be interesting drama. It would be like you and I writing a character who doesn't react to things. They're intentionally choosing people who are on the edge. I'm not, again, I know a number of people who are in that world, great people, but part of what you're trying to feed there is you need the drama. Frankly, the news is getting the same way. The news needs drama, right? So if everybody just agreed and your right-wing station came out and agreed with your left-wing station, well, that's not interesting. No one's going to watch it. People watch for fireworks. So this is a societal issue that we're looking for entertainment in everything.
Yeah, absolutely true. And talking of trauma and going back to something you mentioned earlier, these DNA websites, I mean, is the game worth the candle there? Do you reckon there are more pluses than minuses? It's an extraordinary phenomenon, isn't it?
It is, all the things that we used to read, years ago, Michael, you remember reading all those books where the person found out that, was raised by the wrong father and all of that. I don't think that's going to be happening much anymore. And there's been a lot of, there was a stat that I read, and again, I don't know how anybody would possibly know this, but through history, anywhere between 5 and 10%, that was on the low side, of men, I'm talking about over the last hundreds of years, have raised child that they believe were their own that wasn't their own. Nowadays, eventually that's going to get found out. And so what I'm always looking for as a writer is how can I, look, there's how many stories there are out there. I don't like technology. I'm not really good with technology or whatever else, but this is the world we live in. And so that we can have these sort of things, and how can I use them to make a really compelling plot while also pointing out something societal? It gives me both things. It's really an interesting subject to kind of look at, lay bare, that everybody now can find relatives. And you go online and suppose, right, you go online, you find a half sibling. Suppose you go online and find out your father wasn't your father. There's a lot of things like that that are actually going on. How can you as a novelist take that and do something different with it? That's the thing. A lot of those things I just mentioned, they've been done. So you got to figure out a way of doing something different with it.
Yep, and that's the match, and I'd certainly urge anyone watching this who hasn't read it to go and read it, because it covers all those things and more.
Thank you.
Maybe stepping back to last year's book now, Win. This is like one of the Myron Bolitar books, but with the ultimate twist. It's actually got a new narrator in it, and I want to talk about that a bit. But first of all, that whole series is based on a friendship, isn't it, between two people. There's Myron, who's a sports agent, the old money billionaire, Win Lockwood. We don't see that sort of relationship too often in crime novels, it seems to me. It's a fabulous idea, but where did that come from, and how did Myron and Win become best friends?
Well, when I created Myron, I love sidekicks. I love buddy. I mean, from the Sherlock and Watson to Batman and Robin to Spencer and Hawk. I love the crime duo, the sidekick. And so when I created Myron Bolitar, I wanted to give him a sidekick. The urban tough had kind of been done. The computer geek had kind of been done. So I took my college roommate, who has a name equally obnoxious to Windsor Horn Lockwood III, remains my best friend. I am wearing a golf shirt now because somehow he talked me into playing this stupid game over the years. And I tweaked him. Because what was interesting about him was he was ridiculously good looking and blonde and privileged and patrician, but also people hated him on sight for it. You know, he would be called a punch-worthy face. You know, you just saw the sort of jaw and the red hair, the red face and the ruddy complexion, all that sort of thing. And people just hated him on sight for it. It's almost a weird sort of prejudice. And I thought, well, what if you took that too far? And what if he had to start really choosing between living behind the hedges or going all the way in and defending himself? And then and he ended up being a little bit sociopathic. This guy and I are still best friends, and it ended up being that the Myron and Wynne books, you know, they're thrillers. Hopefully they're really well plotted. Hopefully there's mystery and all that sort of thing. But I think what people really tune in for is that friendship between these two men. And that's really what sort of carried the series as it's gone on. Myron is based on a fictional version of myself. Wynne is based on a fictional version of my closest friend, who also people looked at when we were both at college, saying, "Well, these two guys will never get along." I was a Jewish kid from outside of Newark, New Jersey, so that's what makes life interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, surely is. I know Wynne had a few chapters to himself in the last, I think, Volatile book was Home, but now in the new book, the one from last year, Wynne, he takes center stage. Why did you do that? What happened to Myron in your mind, I guess, as much as on the page?
Well, readers have always said, "Oh, why don't you do a Wynne book?" I mean, that people love Wynne because he's the violent sidekick, and he's frankly a sociopath. And I've always been resistant to it because I always feel that those kind of great sidekick characters, less is more. You think you want more, but the reason that means I'm doing my job right, that you want more. If you came to me and said, "Oh, I had exactly enough Wynne," or "I had too much Wynne," then I didn't do my job right. So I resisted for a very long time. And then I always start with an idea, like I've explained how I came up with the other one. And in this case, there was a world I wanted to do involving a stolen Vermeer painting, Upper West Side of Manhattan, expensive apartment, a hoarder who might be living there with a past. I wanted to do like I don't know if you know who Patty Hearst is in your country, a famous kidnapping case from when I was a young boy, a very rich from the Hearst family, a young woman, controversial kidnapping that happened in that. And I wanted to do all these things. And of course, that's Wynne's world. And once I decided to do that, I realized I had to jump in with both feet. You can't play around and pretend. I have to be in Wynne's head, in a sociopath's head, for the entire book. Make him somebody you want to hang with, make him enjoyable. And it was easier than I thought, which might bother me. But it was really fun to be, and to resist the challenge of having Myron come back in. Now, Myron's still a big part of his life. He talks about Myron a lot. Myron still is there on every page, even if he's never appears. So I resisted that urge, that crutch, to have Myron come and help him at some point. And I thought it was one of my best books. I was just really thrilled with how it came out and people's reaction to it.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience reading it, because for me, Wynne has always been a bit of a kind of psychopath, except he's devoted to doing good works, and he's obviously a friend of Myron. And I found it really interesting the way by the end you got me to actually relate to him as a character. It was kind of spooky. Was that one of the reasons you elevated him like that? Was it almost an element of personal challenge to see if you could?
Yeah, it was. Because there's things that Wynne does that horrify or mortify you, but you also agree with him. There's a side of all of us, including myself. I realized, you say, "Oh, Myron, he's Wynne," but there's a side of every character that's me. And Wynne makes some tough choices, and I want you to think about those choices. I want you to say, "Well, maybe I wouldn't have done it any differently. Maybe I want a guy like Wynne on my side." And also the other thing is, Mike, when you're creating a character, it's not really so important he's likable or nice. I say, like, if you're sitting in a pub, whose conversation do you want to overhear? Who do you want to sit with? And oh boy, that answer is Wynne. Wynne is the guy you want to know more about. It was also really fun to explore a super wealthy world from a guy who gets it. This is not a political whine, but rich people, by and large, especially those who've inherited, don't get it. Because they have been given so much in life, they can't accept that they were lucky or won a life lottery. So they feel they have to be special somehow. Like the fact that I have this, it wasn't just that my dad did something or whatever else, or my grandfather. I have to be special, and that means you're not, which makes them, I think, often cruel. Wynne gets that. Wynne gets that he kind of hit the lottery there. And so I think his perspective on wealth also is something that people find appealing. And actually, I think he's more rational about being wealthy than most people. He realizes, if I do this and I get caught, I'm not going to go to jail. I'll pay a fine. It'll be all right. But if somebody else in a different economic situation did it, yeah, they'd go to jail. I don't necessarily like it, but it works for me, and that's the way it is. And I think people have really gravitated toward that part of the novel as well, I hope.
No, definitely. Just one area where Wynne is not quite in the top rank is golf, because he's not quite as good as his father used to say at one point, because he just doesn't care quite enough, which I thought was a really lovely observation. But clearly you're interested in the game, and you told us you play it now. How's it going?
Didn't go very well today. And there's a lot of traffic afterwards. That's why I was almost late to this thing. But I took it up my 40s, which is a mistake because you'll never be good. But I do play with my pal Wynne, who's great. He's a great golfer. And I really enjoy the social aspect of it. And when you spend 4 hours on a course with somebody, boy, you get to know them. I think it does help me create characters. It's also one of the few times in life, still my course is a little bit old fashioned. You can't have your phone, you can't check your phone or your emails or texts or anything. And I think that's good for me. And I think it's good for everybody. We really got to turn ourselves off the internet, he says, as he speaks to you via the internet. So I recognize the hypocrisy in saying that. But I'm better off when I can have hours like that. And with golf, it's 4 hours. I usually leave my phone in the locker or whatever, so there's no chance that I'm going to be doing any of that. And so that's the aspect that I enjoy. It's an interesting game. It's everything is the opposite. You hit down to hit it up. You have to hit hard to hit soft. There's all those sort of things. It's a metaphor for life. It gets to everybody in some way. And I get it's an elitist game and all of that stuff. It's been my and where I live, I can only play 4 or 5 months a year, but during that time I do like to play.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon in Australia. It seemed to have been in decline a bit before COVID came along, but I think COVID's given it a bit of a boost because it's for obvious reasons.
Here too.
Yeah, no, it's good.
It's expensive and takes too long. I keep saying they should make the holes. They actually were trying this for a while. They were doing holes the size of manhole covers, and that's just. It's genius because you still have to be skilled. You can chip it in. You can make putts from 30 or 40 feet, but you're not standing over a 2-footer for and the game went from 4 hours to 3 hours. But the purists are a pain in the necks in that sport, and so it didn't last. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything you guys care about, except the 3 of you who maybe play golf. But we'll move on.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Do you reckon there might be some more Wynne books in the future?
I do. I can give other examples too of how I come up with ideas for books. I come up with an idea first, and then I say, who's going to tell the story? So I explained to you before about the match, about a little kid coming out of the woods. And then I say, well, who's going to tell the story? And the answer is not, in that case, of course, is not Myron Bolitar. He's not a kid who came out of the woods. So I know it's not going to be a Myron book. It's going to be new characters and all of that. So I never force it. Every time I ask, who's going to tell this story? And that's like when I said, well, who's going to tell a story about an art heist and when this hoarder is found murdered in a very expensive apartment but no one knows who he is, and this Vermeer is found, who would be great to explore that world? Well, the answer is Wynne. So my answer is yes, I do plan on writing another Myron book. Yes, I do plan on writing another Wynne book, but I don't know for sure. I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to do it just because the audience wants it or whatever else. That just doesn't work for me. I start with the idea and then I figure out who's going to tell that story.
Okay. Just getting back to the subject of writing generally, and I'm interested in editing your own work. I think one of the great challenges for someone who takes up writing, apart from simply getting the words on the page, is trying to work out the relationship between that creative side of the brain and the editing. Can you tell us a bit about your editing process? I know you do a lot. I think you do it as you go along, don't you?
Yep, I do both. I do as I go along at the end. I really don't know any writer who doesn't rewrite a lot. I mean, I was doing a conversation with my pal Lee Child, who always is saying, well, I don't rewrite. I'm like, So you don't go back and change the wording. Oh, well, I do that. That's rewriting. Well, Lee, stop it. You don't change the plot. That's one thing, but you do tons of rewriting, and I don't know anybody who doesn't. So first of all, I start each day by kind of rereading and rewriting what I did the day before. So I don't really write like this. I kind of write like this each day, going back. And then every 75 pages or so, I go back to the beginning and I rewrite it there that way too. And this way, by the time I reach the end, the early chapters have already been written 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So that helps me. This is super important if you're trying to write. The hardest part is to turn off that voice in your head that says you suck. And I have it. Every writer has it. We are all have imposter syndrome. I know, Michael, you have it. I don't even got to ask you because you're a writer, so you have it. The only ones who don't have it, only bad writers think they're good. The only one who doesn't do that, somebody you don't want to hang out with and somebody who's not very good at it. We all have doubts. You have to turn off that voice. So, Anne Lamott called it the shitty first draft. I say you just throw it up, whatever it is, you got to just get that first stuff down. And when I try to, I don't even, because I know I'm going to rewrite it and rewrite a lot, I don't even worry about verbs. Just get the story down. I compare it to diamond mining, not something I know a lot about, but in diamond mining, you get the first thing you take out of the ground is this really ugly, if you ever seen an ugly big stone, but that's where the value is. Now the second, third, fourth drafts, now you're going to chip at it, and you're going to shine it, now you're going to make it something beautiful that you want to wear. But what's valuable is that first stone you're getting out of the ground. Don't let anything stop that voice. That voice of doom is what paralyzes all writers. So I allow myself to stink. I just say, don't worry if it stinks. You can always fix it tomorrow. The quote that I say quite frequently, and if you Google me, it'll probably pop up first, is because I don't know, it seems something that I've said a lot, but you can always fix bad pages. You can't fix no pages. So get it down.
That's for sure. We spoke earlier about a very fleeting Australian connection to one of your books. Another Australian connection anyway, I came across is you did a sort of tour with Missy Higgins, didn't you, back in 2009? Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, it was. I was listening to a ton to Missy's music. I think I mentioned in one of the books. I'm trying to think. That's the name of the song just flew from my head. I don't know who I am without you.
Sorry, I can't help you here.
I don't know who I am without. Somebody help me with the title. Where I Stood by Missy Higgins. It was a great song. I got both of the albums at the time. She had 2 albums. I was listening to it nonstop, and I put it in a book. And somebody, I don't remember anymore. Somebody in Missy's camp had read it, and we got introed that way. And it ended up being that she was going to be touring in the U.S., or she was going to have a new record out in the U.S. at the same time I was doing a book tour. So I don't remember who, and it's funny, I don't remember whose idea it was. It was Missy, mine, or someone in one of our camps who said, we went out together and we did a week tour where I did readings and talked about how to write. And she sang songs and talked how she wrote. And most of it was us talking together about how similar our creative process was while she was writing songs and I was writing books. And then whenever the audience got antsy, I said, Missy, sing a song. And it was like an hour and 20-minute show, and it was great. I have to say, for me, I was sitting there listening to one of my favorite artists, and I would get to sit like right next to her on stage with a piano while she played. And she's an amazing person. She's so smart, and she's so kind, and she's such an artist. And we had a blast. It was really, it was just such a breath of fresh air, and the audiences loved it. It was just, rather than coming and hearing me give my usual spiel or going to a concert, you really got the best of both worlds, and people felt like it was a book music experience. And I know for Missy and myself, it was a real high for us every night to be on stage. Her audience, my audience, both of our audiences together. Half the people that would come in had never heard of Missy, half the people had never heard of me. And by the end, they were happily buying her music and my books.
Yeah, so it was a lovely idea, very original. We live in a golden age of crime writing. I know you agree with that. Any thoughts on why that's the case?
I think it's what I said before. I think that we're the ones telling stories still. And so we're more relevant than ever because, and this isn't a knock, I'm not trying to knock Main Street or literary writing or what we call that, because I'm not a big fan of labeling anything, whatever. But people still want story, and we are telling it. I also think that the world is opening up. The same thing, I think it's the golden age of TV as well. Like I'm making my new show called, Hold Tight, is a Polish TV series filmed in Poland with Polish actors and in the language of Polish. Now you can watch it, of course, dubbed. I'd prefer if you watched it with the original language and subtitles, but that didn't happen a number of years ago. And it's really cool and really refreshing to get different viewpoints. So I think we're much more accepting, even though we seem to be having other world problems, we're much more accepting of various voices. We're allowing more voices in. There's more writers of diversity, more women than ever before. That's going to also make us stronger. And the final thing I'll say is that modern civilization has to make us stronger. Why? Because, we're going back to Dostoevsky and Wilde. They weren't competing with anybody other things other than writing. They didn't have TV. They didn't have radio. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have social media. They didn't have these stupid things people are constantly picking up. They didn't have streaming services. So our books have to be better and more gripping, or you're not going to read books anymore.
Yep, no, I think you're true. It's a very exciting time to
It's great.
be doing this and to be reading it too. We're very lucky. I might just finish up. I might ask you one last question, then we'll get into some of our audience questions.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Child is retiring at what many might call his peak. It's an unusual decision for a writer. I think most writers need to be sort of carried out. Could you see yourself doing that one day?
Maybe I had a brother who was as talented as Andrew. But no, I don't think so. I might slow down.
Yeah.
Certainly the TV has been a distraction in some ways, but it's also actually helped me write because, most writers are introverts in some way, right? I spend most of my life, and you've spent in a room by myself. That's what I do. But every once in a while, it's nice to get out. So I'll go out on a TV thing. I'll go to the set. I'll be there. It'll be great. I'll talk to the actors for like 3 days, and then I'm losing my mind that I got to run back and hide in my room. And so they kind of feed off each other rather than taking time from each other. I'm not exactly sure what else I would do. I don't, other than golf, which I mentioned that I'm not particularly good at, and I don't really do that often. I don't have hobbies. I don't collect stamps. I don't have like antiques. That's a story I once heard, which I loved, from a rock star was telling me about another rock star. And this other rock star had started to, became very rich and bought a house and the second house. And then he started filling them with these kind of really cool, expensive Persian rugs, ornamental Persian or Asian kind of different rugs. And he really got into it. He loved rugs. And every weekend he would go and he'd be picking out rugs, and he was, he'd be studying about rugs. And as the rock star said, and he wasn't writing music anymore. He was into rugs. I'm not into rugs. I don't get that kind of distracted. I'm into telling you a story. I'm into what we're doing right now. I am into the fact that you are going to, some of you, take the match home tonight, and you are going to read it. And that's when it comes to life, as a book for me. I am Berkeley's tree in the woods. If I write a book and no one reads it, I don't exist as a writer. Conversely, when somebody else reads it, it's like the Arab expression, when one man dies, a whole universe dies. When one of you reads The Match, a whole new Wilde and Peter and Hester and all these characters comes to life in your head, different from everybody else's. You and I have a one-on-one relationship, and that's still, as you can probably hear in my voice, what jazzes me. Will that not one day not jazz me? Maybe. I don't think so.
That sort of takes us back to what you said at the beginning about the importance of desperation in your life. You've got to maintain that desperation, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why, otherwise you start phoning it in. It really is. You start phoning it in if you don't care.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. So I've got a few questions here from our audience, which I'll put to you, if that's okay. We got Sean from Parramatta asking, you've said elsewhere that your job is to give people an escape. Where do you think they want to escape to?
Yeah, maybe escape isn't the right word. I mean, it's a diversion, it's a distraction. It's just moments of enjoyment. When I was around 15, I think I was 15 years old, maybe 16, my father gave me my first adult thriller, which is William Goldman's Marathon Man. I credit that book with making me want to become a writer, even though even when I read it, I didn't know. But I remember reading that book, and I had that sensation like this, like you could put a gun to my head, and I wouldn't put this book down. I am so into this book. I'm so immersed and so lost. And I thought not only was it a great feeling for me, but how William Goldman must feel extraordinarily lucky that he makes people feel this way. And that's what I want for you. I mean, I want that. I love that feeling when you can't put a book down. You can't wait to get back to it. It becomes your world. I'm using the term escape as a shortcut to that feeling. It's the same with the TV shows, frankly. If it's 8 episodes, if you start Stay Close tonight and it takes you 3 weeks to get through all 8 episodes, I'll be pretty disappointed. Most people, it's 2 or 3 days. And other people are like, well, don't you want it? No, I want you to have that kind of, that I want my books to be called, the novel of immersion, the book you take on vacation to Cairns, but you don't want to leave your hotel room because you want to keep reading.
Okay, sounds good. Jody at Gosford says, you did a TV series in Britain called The Five that was not based on a book, quite unusually. Why didn't you want to write it as a book? And can you see that ever happening again?
Well, it happened again. If you have Netflix, watch Safe with Michael C. Hall. That's not based off a book either. And I'm doing another one, which I can't tell you too much about, that's also based on an original idea. The Five was my first English language TV series. And I'd come up with an idea that had 4 lead characters. And for some reason, I always saw it visually, as opposed to we were come up for viscerally as a story to write. I debated it. I'd done as many as 3 leads in Stay Close when I wrote the novel Stay Close. I thought 4 would be difficult. And just by sheer luck of how the world works, somebody was trying to buy one of my books to make into a TV series. The rights had been taken to that one. This is a person on TV who does TV shows that I really admire. And I said, I had this idea for this show. I've been calling in my head The Five. And I gave her 2 sentences and she went, whoa. And we called Sky Network. And about 3 weeks later, we were all signed up and I was starting to write it. And the woman's name is Nicholas Schindler. She's done Happy Valley, Last Tango in Halifax, It's a Sin, Queer as Folk. And she and I have been partners since. We did The Five was the first one we've done, which I think you can still find in Australia. I think SBS maybe has, and I'm not sure. Might even be on Netflix in Australia. I'm not sure. Then we did Safe, The Stranger, and Stay Close. So all 4 of those shows I've done with this team, this my producing partner, Nicholas Schindler, and that's how it started with The Five. So yeah, I'm going to do more. Safe is another one that's also an original idea, and there will be more.
Okay. Here's one. People are interested in the TV. Here's one from Mark down in Sutherland who says he's impressed that you can work with 2 or more stories at once because you've got the book you're writing and you've got the Netflix and you've got a couple of Netflix. Do they ever get confused? How do you manage to keep them separate? And you've written so many books already in your head. Is it quite easy to keep them separate, or is that difficult?
Well, first of all, a terrible memory, so that's probably helps out that I don't remember what I'm doing. I can only write 1 book at a time. I've never been able to write 2 books at a time. I don't know how anybody does that. And I give that book everything that I have. With TV, I can do more than 1 TV series at a time, and I can do the TV while I'm doing a book. I can keep them sort of separate. The first step, actually, when I'm doing a TV series is, for the most part, I have to reread the book. So I remember not long ago when we did The Innocent, I think the book had come out in 2004, and I had not read it, or 2005. I had not read the book since it comes out. I don't reread my own books. Who does? And I usually get the audio, so I listen to it fast on audio. And there was moments where I'm going, where am I going with this? Who is this character? Like, I knew the very end, but I really forgot. And I was like, every once in a while, like, oh, wow, that was a pretty good twist there. I didn't even see that coming. And then sometimes I go, wow, that was too much. All these sort of things. But then I can see it again in a new light and remember it in a new, in different way. And with the TV, it's a collaboration, so it's not just me. So there's a lot of times I'm doing one right now called Shelter, which is based off my young adult series with Mickey Bolitar, Myron's nephew. And there are aspects I keep forgetting, even though I recently reread all 3 books. But I have a team, I'm like, oh my God, how does Mickey get from, and someone will be able to to tell me. But that's not to say I sometimes don't like. I'm like, wait, which book was that? Which? Because it's over 30 books now, and you know, I don't mix them up when I'm working on them because I'm just lost in that world.
Okay. Here's one from Jo in Hornsby, who, interesting question. She said, do you find that your subconscious is useful to you as a writer? Do you often go to sleep thinking about a problem and wake up with the solution?
Rarely. It sounds more magical than it is. I do keep a piece of paper and pen, and every once in a while I'll get gold, but for the most part, it's not. The problem is, like, if you dreamt something and you thought about it at night, you know, you'll write it down because it felt so real to you. You had a dream, and you'll wake up the next day and it'll be a bear with a blender, you know, runs into a window. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever, quite frequently. One book, this, and I hate this because it sounds kind of weird and magical. I couldn't figure out the ending of Gone for Good with one character. And I was in London at the time on book tour, and I got really sick, and I was sort of like hallucinating and shaking in bed. And I hallucinated the answer, and I wrote down, oh, the ghost isn't here for X, he's here for Y. And when I wrote it the next day, I had to change one word that came before it, and it completely shattered the ending and made the ending work in a really great way. But most of it is, I sit there with a pencil and I just keep writing thoughts until something good comes out when it comes to ideas. I'm a big believer in thinking on paper.
Wow. You still have to, the ending, you still have to have the ending in sight, don't you, when you start? You've said that you can make up almost everything else, but you just need to know where you're going, which is...
I always know the ending before I start. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like a, it's sort of...
And you just need to, I know where the destination's going to end, and that's key. Think about it. Any trip you travel, I'm going across your country. If I know where I'm ending, I can go up, down, north, south, east. I can go everywhere because I know where I'm ending. So I can do it with some confidence. If I start wandering off that road and I have no idea where I'm going, I can really stay lost.
Okay, interesting.
I see Catherine popping up on our screen. That's
okay, Catherine, you want us to wrap it up now?
Well, yes, and I'm going to take a privilege and ask a question myself in a minute. So
please.
Okay. I'll say goodbye then. Harlan, thanks very much for talking to us.
Michael, it was really great. Thank you so much. You're beautifully prepared. And it was really, I just enjoyed the conversation. Thanks very much.
Hope you keep writing books for many decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks, man.
it was really, that was really sensational. It's great to get a proper insight into a writer's passion. And I must say, I love the inspiration, perspiration, and desperation. I think that's a really interesting, well, just like a really good short way of capturing what you talk about. And also, thank you very much for giving me, as artistic director, an idea for something at another festival: music and a book.
There we go.
Somebody
Missy,
who loves...
Missy and I can headline.
Yeah, I don't know that
Our
it'll be
return engagement after 13 years. I miss her.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her since then.
Well, no, but it's a
Out
fantastic
there, Missy,
idea.
hi. I miss you. If anybody knows Missy, tell Missy I say hi.
Well, that's great. No, this was so, I said, so interesting. And I like that idea of novel immersion, because that's very much what I do. And listening as well. You know, you listen to stuff in the car, and I won't get out of the car. I'm like, I'll drive around the block another couple of times, which is
love that.
Which is fantastic. And but the question I have is the different languages. You say you like some of the book, you like the Spanish versions. Why? Is it a cultural twist?
Well, though, I just happen to think they did a good job. The director in Spain, a guy named Oriol Paulo. Some of you have probably seen one or two of his movies if you're a foreign movie buff. He just really, I think, knew what he was doing. I mean, it's a graphic. The only called negative or positive, if you don't like shows that are somewhat more graphic, that was pretty graphic with the violence, where the British ones and the Polish ones are less so. I just thought he did a really interesting job with it. The idea is that the different cultures, when you watch the Polish one, it really immerses you in the culture of Poland, which is unique for me. I mean, I haven't really experienced that as a TV series, so I think it adds a dimension to a show when it's set someplace interesting.
Have you ever had the same book recorded, filmed in different languages, or a different cultural context, like the same story?
I actually have. I had my book No Second Chance was filmed as both a French show and a German show. I think the French show, which was the original, turned out much better. I think the French, the French did it much better. The German cast wasn't quite as good, and I just don't. And they cut the story up a little bit. But I have, and I plan on doing that again. I'd like to
Yeah.
try that again.
It would be so interesting to watch. 'Cause
Yeah.
one, as a viewer, we would learn about the different cultures, as you were saying. Look, I
Yeah.
must stop. I can't really keep going like this for too long. Thank you so much. That was
Thank
just
you.
brilliant. And next
you.
week, we're back in America with the great Don Winslow, which
Oh,
is
my
gonna
buddy
be
Don. Tell Don I say hi.
yeah. So yeah, the first book in the new trilogy, City on Fire, which is an amazing book. I haven't quite finished it, but really looking forward to that. Thank you so much again, Harlan.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Michael. We have had a great time. Hope the audience, I know the audience will have enjoyed it as much as we have, and look forward to seeing all of you next week. But do join us if you'd like to.
Take care.
Goodbye, and thank you.